You might remember kind of in the middle or towards the end of 2014, Glenn Beck, right-wing radio host, stood up and actually clapped for parents who were not having their children vaccinated. He now is saying that anti-vaxxers are being persecuted like Galileo. I know, that might not make any sense to you, but let me play for you what Glenn Beck had to say about it.
God gave me a brain. God gave me personal choice and responsibility for those choices. I'm going to say no to those vaccines because I've done my homework. Here's another group of people that are now being rounded up and pointed at and called morons and idiots and crackpots and crazies. Just totally discredited. If you stand out of line, where is anybody saying, my gosh, we're living in the days of Galileo?
As it happens, it's the exact opposite of Galileo being persecuted. Galileo was being persecuted by those who didn't want to accept the science. Galileo had the science on his side. Anti-vaccine individuals are being, I think persecuted is the wrong term, are being critiqued because they are choosing to ignore the science to push a scienceless anti-vaccine agenda. It's the exact opposite of what happened to Galileo.
It is the exact opposite. And Glenn Beck I think he's made this comparison before with either Galileo or Copernicus or something like that, not realizing, of course, that it's a reversal with the religion and the science.
And earlier in the segment, Glenn Beck does talk about the increase in the prevalence of autism. And I actually think that that's a really serious discussion that we should be having. But to simply assume that because we don't know what it is, it must be vaccines is kind of like a God of the gaps hypothesis, where anything we can't explain, we say God must have done it. Any condition we can't explain, we say vaccines must have done it. And if you consider the amount of pollution that industrialization and the modern world have put into our atmosphere, if you consider the amount of processed food that people are consuming, there are so many things that really warrant investigation when it comes to the prevalence of autism. And let's not forget that an increase in the diagnosis of autism based on how we diagnose could be hugely responsible as well. Whereas 100 years ago, you might have had what now are considered autism spectrum disorders just kind of written off as your kid is not that smart, right? That was a common way in which many conditions that we now understand used to be written off in your kid's not that smart or other ways, right? That's just an example. So the fact that we have now wrapped in many more combinations of symptoms as autism spectrum disorders also can't be ignored.
And I mean, if as you said, we've seen an increase in autism, but I mean, across the board, we've been getting vaccinated up until recently. And if it was the vaccines, why would autism be going up now? I think we're surrounded by more crap than ever in this country. We need to look at everything.